Matt, let's stay on that topic. How can Miami pull this off? Again, the quarterback, they're going to have to get a good quarterback, whoever they roll out there. That's an obvious thing. But are there things with Florida State? Again, they've been rolling, they've had such a great season, but are there some vulnerabilities? Are there some ways to maybe, essentially saying all teams do have weaknesses as good as they are, but are some things that stand out to you? I know you just touched on a little bit there, but is there something in particular that stands out to you with FSU?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. And again, we're kind of nitpicking Florida State here. They're really, really good. I've got them number 3 in the country on my top 25 ballot polls, and playoff committee has them 4. So again, we're nitpicking. But Jordan Travis, his accuracy is just okay. I think he's like 44th in the country in terms of completion percentage. And obviously that's not all on him. He has to have the blocking in front. He has to have the receivers to catch it, all that stuff. But that's one potential issue where if there's I can envision a scenario, maybe not this week, but at some point where Travis misses a couple throws or a couple drops or something weird happens like that, where that's an issue that comes back to bite Florida State. So that's one thing, is try and get Travis uncomfortable and force him into some incompletions that kill drives. The other thing is Florida State's run defense is just okay. Statistically, they're, I think, in the mid 60s or somewhere like that. So they're gettable that way. And Miami's run game, I think, has shown a little bit of progress here the last couple of weeks. I know Mario talked about that the other day, just in terms of being able to get some of those tough yards. So maybe there's a scenario there where Miami's ground game, based on an improving offensive line, is able to kind of not necessarily gash Florida State, but just sustain drives and kind of plod along a little bit and keep that Florida State offense off the field. So those are kind of the keys that I would look for. If Miami is going to upset the Noles, or at least keep it competitive, those are a couple of things that I think kind of probably has to happen.
Matt, I'm just going to add to your points there. Miami defensively with defensive coordinator Lance Guidry, he's been doing a really good job. And I think defensively, Miami's much better than they were a year ago. And I think he's done a really good job of finding weaknesses of teams and trying to either come up with, like I said, they went to some 3-man looks, some stack stuff there, with maybe bringing an extra linebacker instead of their 4-2-5 base. Blitz packages. We've seen that. We've seen linebackers. We've seen safeties, corners. We've seen different things like that. And I think that's what it's going to take in this one. They've got to come up with a plan to kind of, as you mentioned, kind of just disrupt Jordan or kind of get him off rhythm. That will be a key. Certainly Jordan's running ability, Miami's very well aware of, but I think that's going to be something that Miami's going to have to do from that standpoint. And running the ball, Miami wants to run the ball.
Yep.
Mark Fletcher had the good game last week. For me, the 23 carries is something I don't think will be efficient in this one. I think they've got to get other guys involved and keep fresh back. So if Henry Parrish can kind of be at full strength, Don Chaney Jr. mixing those guys in, if A.J. Allen is back, whatever combination Miami has there, I think they've got to run the ball. And they've really leaned on the offensive line. Touched on Tyler Van Dyke's struggles and whatever they do at quarterback. The offensive line, once again, has to play really well in this one for Miami to have a shot. And I think grinding it out and getting those running, get the ground game going, as you mentioned. I think that'll be kind of the recipe for Miami. In addition to that, kind of go, mixing things up on defense. That's kind of Miami's recipe there. Matt, I am curious in this one. Again, Florida State's heavy favorites. They've already clinched a spot in the ACC title game. Miami certainly not coming in with a lot of positive momentum. Any sort of thing of a letdown maybe for Florida State overlooking that? I know it's a rivalry game. I know they want to win this and win big. Anything like that? Anything that you can sense with that looking ahead and
No.
kind of, as you mentioned?
No, not with this rivalry, not the way Florida State does things. Every coach kind of does the rivalries different. I've heard some were like, oh, no, they're just another opponent. And, some people take it to the extreme on the other end. No, Florida State starts the year. A lot of the stuff that they do is built around 2 games, Miami and the Gators. Jordan Travis was talking about that the other day. I've heard Mike Norvell talk about it plenty of times. Those are the 2 games that we circle them on the calendar. Those are the big deal. We have to win those games. That's critical. So yeah, I can't imagine a scenario where Florida State's overlooking Miami. I think if anything, they're going to want to rub their face in it the way they did last year down at Hard Rock Stadium. I think that's going to be one of those things where, there was a time, I think it was a late goal line stand or inside the red zone or stop or whatever it was. And Norvell made a big deal about it afterwards, the fact that they kept him out of the end zone and that being a big deal in a 42-point game. Was that the reason why they won? No, of course it wasn't. But that was one of those kind of extra little, just kind of turn the wheels or turn the knife a little bit that this rivalry is great at. So yeah, no, they're not going to take them lightly. Nothing like that.
And I know Miami, they're doing the thing of it's just another game, that kind of talk. And maybe it's because of where they're at right now. They've got a lot of things internally that they've got to figure out. And it definitely feels like, when I look at this game, you look at it in the schedule for both teams, you kind of look ahead, but I always think of, especially from a Miami, looking at how Miami seasons have gone, of what it's going to look like when this game comes up, and at one point it looked like Miami was doing well. It looked like both, there could be high stakes in this one for both teams. And then Miami shows up to the game and they're not at what they were earlier in the year as a top 25 team. I know that, that the high expectations, the high thoughts, that they could compete and maybe get one of those two spots in the ACC. It did look like that at one point. Now they're sitting at ninth coming into this one, and trying to stay afloat. Coaches and players, they always talk about, you got another game, but you don't win this. You're 6-3. You don't win this. Now you're 6-4. You got Louisville next week. Certainly they've had a great season. So now you're looking at what's the season going to end up like for Miami. Matt, your time's very valuable. I always appreciate your insight. I was curious, though, as a voter, I think a lot of fans would be curious maybe what that's like as a top 25 voter. Maybe if you could kind of just walk us through your process of watching games or keeping track internally. And I know that I think what's really interesting is everybody's got their own agenda, or not agenda, but opinions on how they want to go about it, or they view games differently and try not to look at what other people are ranking. But how does your process go, and how much do you kind of enjoy putting this whole thing together each and every week?
Oh, I certainly enjoy it. It's one of the highlights of my week. There's no question. It's a good amount of work, not just like on Sunday morning when I sit down with my Cheerios and my coffee and I'm watching college football final and I've got all the box scores up and going through it. But, I take it very seriously, very, very seriously. I know I'm not curing cancer or anything like that, but this is my job. It's an important thing because the AP poll is something that, the Ralph Russo, the AP national football writer, always goes on a rant, but college football has changed so much since 1936. But one of the few constants is the AP poll as a way to measure the ebbs and flows. So I take the job seriously. That means, Wednesday night I was watching a decent amount of the Toledo game before that got out of hand, because Toledo's a team that's in my 20 to 35 mix. So I want to be educated on them. I'll be watching, we're recording this on Thursday. I'll watch as much of the Louisville game as I can because I want to see more about them. During a Saturday, I'm, monitoring as much as possible. If I'm driving somewhere, I've got whatever games on, kind of, again, just staying abreast of things as much as I can. Here's my prop. We can see this here in great handwriting. But I do it by hand. Just that's better for me. Every week I've got who's in for sure, who's maybe in, who's maybe out, who's definitely out, to kind of help me keep track, make sure I don't miss anybody. There was one week where I forgot Oregon a couple of years ago, just accidentally left them out. So I've come up with a good checks and balances system to make sure I just don't accidentally forget about who would have been number 17 or whatever. And then I look at as much as I can. Again, I'm looking at who did you play? Who did you beat? How were those games in terms of the margin of victory? How is it, not like game control, but was it a close win? Was it one with a lot of turnover luck? Did you double them in yards? I look at the advanced metrics that I can, SP Plus and FPI from ESPN, the Sagarin ratings, some of those. Again, just to get as much information as I can and to throw it all together. It's more art than science is the other thing that I would want people to know. You can have certain rules. Like I generally try not to drop a team if they won a conference game on the road, because that's really hard to do. But I've done that before. So like there's no hard and set rules. You can't do that, because the reason Florida State's really good is not the same reason Michigan's really good. So you can't treat them exactly the same. You have to adjust for who you're talking about and everything else. And so yeah, it's more art than science. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And I know at the end of the day, I'm going to tick off some random fan base. I have no idea who it's going to be. This week it's going to be Penn State. Next week it's going to be Texas. And nothing you can do about that other than just try and do your best and make sure at the end of it, your logic is as consistent as possible. And if I have Mississippi at 9 ahead of Penn State. I better have a good reason for it, because there's going to be some ticked off Nittany Lions fans in Harrisburg that are going to be upset with me. So I better have a good reason to tell them, even if at the end of the day we don't agree.
And your approach, I think everybody can respect your approach and how you go about it. And I think that's great to hear, just the professional and just how much dedication you go into trying to get it as right in your mind as possible. You're not just, throwing teams out there and this is what I'm doing. And I assume that's what everybody does, all the voters. And I always find it interesting how fans react to voting. And of course, their team is not ranked high enough. But of course, they don't provide their own top 25. It's just, that kind of thing. And the dropping, this team and back in week 3 didn't drop enough, whereas we dropped too much in week 8, that kind of stuff gets a little silly, but it's just really interesting to hear how everything is decided. And it's a lot of fun. And I enjoy all of it. So keep up the good work and the rankings, and it's great. You can always see that, but appreciate you taking the time, Matt, breaking this game down. We'll see how it all goes. We'll see. There's always been great games in this rivalry, so we'll see, but definitely appreciate you taking this time here.
Sure. I'm happy to do it. I love talking about this game. Of all the games I cover every year, this is my favorite. Just because I don't care who wins or loses, my paycheck is the same. But there's always so much intensity in the stakes, no matter how good, no matter how bad they are. There's so much with this game. I'm always going to end up with a really good story at the end of it. Hopefully I can execute it, but there's always going to be something really interesting and fascinating about it. So very happy to come on. Thank you.